Established in 1972 at San Diego Zoo's Institute for Conservation Research, the Frozen Zoo represents humanity's most comprehensive archive against extinction, preserving genetic material from 10,500 individual animals representing 1,220 species and subspecies. The facility stores fibroblast cell cultures, connective tissue cells that divide rapidly in laboratory conditions, in liquid nitrogen at negative 196 degrees Celsius, negative 320 degrees Fahrenheit, allowing them to remain viable indefinitely. The collection includes cells from 9 extinct species, including the Po'uli bird, extinct 2004, and the Hawaiian honey creeper, extinct 2018. Beyond preservation, the Frozen Zoo actively participates in genetic rescue programs. In 2020, scientists successfully created embryos from preserved northern white rhinoceros cells, a species with only 2 living females remaining worldwide. The facility employs specialized cryopreservation techniques developed specifically for each species' unique cellular requirements. Each sample undergoes rigorous genetic sequencing, creating a digital database documenting Earth's vanishing biodiversity. Conservation biologists describe the facility as a modern Noah's Ark, though with a crucial difference. While the biblical vessel saved living creatures, no recordier than the between 1917 and 1926, approximately 4,000 young women worked in American watch factories painting glow-in-the-dark radium dials on timepieces. Their employers at the United States Radium Corporation and Radium Dial Company trained them to point their brushes using their lips, a technique called lip pointing, to create fine lines on watch faces. Each worker ingested small amounts of radium daily, with some even applying the luminous paint to their teeth and faces for amusement, earning them the nickname Ghost Girls for their eerie glow when leaving work. Radium, a radioactive element with a 1,600-year half-life, accumulates in bones like calcium. The workers began developing horrific symptoms. Their jawbones disintegrated, a condition dubbed radium jaw. Teeth fell out, bones spontaneously fractured, and tumors formed throughout their bodies. When 5 workers, Catherine Schaub, Edna Hussman, Quinta McDonald, Albina Larice, and Grace Fryer, sued in 1927, their case established crucial legal precedents for workplace safety. Described in Norse sagas from the 12th and 13th centuries, the blood eagle represents one of history's most elaborate execution methods allegedly practiced by Viking warriors against their highest-ranking enemies. According to accounts in the saga of Ragnar Lodbrok and the tale of Ragnar's sons, the ritual began with the victim placed prone while alive. The executioner would use a sharp implement to cut along both sides of the spine, severing the ribs from the vertebral column. The executioner would then pull the rib cage apart, splaying it outward to resemble wings. The final step involved drawing the lungs out through the wounds and draping them over the exposed ribs, creating the visual of blood-covered wings that would appear to flutter as the victim breathed their final breaths. The sagas specifically mention this punishment being inflicted upon King Ella of Northumbria and King Edmund of East Anglia. Modern historians remain divided on whether the blood eagle represented actual Viking practice or literary exaggeration, though experimental archaeology using animal carcasses demonstrates the procedure's physical possibility, if exceptionally difficult to perform on a living subject. In northern Nigeria's economically challenged states, a specialized group of entertainers known as the Gadawan Kura, hyena handlers, maintain a centuries-old tradition blending performance, spiritual practice, and animal control. These men form complex relationships with spotted hyenas, Africa's second-largest predator capable of crushing elephant bones with 1,100 pounds per square inch jaw strength. The handlers capture hyena cubs, raising them through controversial methods, including herb-infused smoke rituals and controlled starvation periods to establish dominance. During performances in villages and urban centers, the men demonstrate their control by placing their heads inside the hyenas' mouths, commanding the animals to perform tricks, or showcasing docility by having children sit atop the predators. The handlers typically travel with multiple animals, hyenas, baboons, and pythons, creating dramatic multi-species performances. Economic motivation drives this dangerous profession. A successful show can earn more in one day than a month's typical wages. Wildlife conservationists express concern over both animal welfare and public safety, as these powerful carnivores remain wild despite their apparent training, with multiple documented cases of handlers suffering severe or fatal injuries. Between 1975 and 1979, Cambodia's Khmer Rouge regime under Pol Pot implemented one of history's most systematic genocides, transforming the entire nation into an agrarian labor camp while targeting educated citizens for execution. The regime established over 300 killing centers, with Choong Ek near Phnom Penh becoming the most notorious. At this former orchard, approximately 17,000 men, women, and children were executed after torture at the S-21 prison. To conserve ammunition, executioners primarily used agricultural tools, hoes, machetes, and sharpened bamboo sticks for killings. Victims were typically blindfolded, forced to kneel before mass graves, then struck at the base of the skull. Archaeological evidence reveals many victims had their throats cut with serrated palm leaves. Following the Vietnamese invasion that ended the regime, investigators discovered 129 mass graves at Choong Ek alone, with 86 excavated containing 8,985 bodies. Today, the site's memorial stupa displays 5,000 human skulls arranged by age and gender, with visible trauma indicating execution methods. Forensic anthropologists continue documenting newly discovered killing fields. In rural Chinese provinces, the ancient practice of ghost marriage, Minghun, continues despite official prohibition since 1949. This ritual involves matching deceased unmarried individuals through posthumous ceremonies, based on the traditional belief that unmarried spirits bring misfortune to their families. Originally, families arranged symbolic unions between already deceased individuals, using effigies or spirit tablets. However, modern economic pressures have transformed this tradition into a disturbing black market. A deceased bachelor's family may pay up to $30,000 for a suitable female corpse, creating incentive for grave robbing and, in extreme cases, murder. In Shanxi province alone, authorities documented over 30 corpse thefts in a recent 3-year period. Once acquired, the female body undergoes ceremonial preparation, dressing in traditional bridal attire and makeup application, before burial alongside the male deceased. Forensic investigations have uncovered elaborate underground chambers connecting separate coffins with miniature household items, symbolizing the couple's eternal domestic arrangement. Anthropologists note that the practice reflects the continuing importance of family lineage in rural China. Within hours of Napoleon Bonaparte's death on May 5, 1821, while in exile on St. Helena, his personal physician, Francesco Antomarchi, began preparing to create the emperor's death mask, following long-standing European tradition for preserving the likeness of significant historical figures. The process involved coating the deceased's face with plaster of Paris, allowing it to harden, then carefully removing the negative impression to create a positive cast. Napoleon's mask required particular care due to the island's tropical climate accelerating decomposition. The resulting death mask revealed details lost in official portraits, smallpox scars from his youth, asymmetrical facial features, and the serene expression contrasting with his tumultuous life. Multiple copies were produced from the original mold, creating confusion about authenticity, with competing claims from Antomarchi and British doctor Archibald Arnott, who was also present. These masks became highly coveted collector's items. The Musée de l'Armée in Paris displays what experts consider the most authentic version. Modern forensic analysis of Napoleon's death mask contributed crucial evidence. Phantom limb syndrome afflicts approximately 80% of all amputees, creating the neurological paradox where patients experience intense sensations, including pain, itching, and movement, in limbs that no longer exist. First documented by 16th-century French military surgeon Ambroise Paré, the phenomenon gained scientific attention when Civil War physician Silas Weir Mitchell cataloged hundreds of cases among Union soldiers. The condition occurs because the brain's somatosensory cortex, which maps bodily sensations, retains its neural architecture after amputation. This creates a neurological disconnect. The brain continues sending and expecting signals from the missing limb. Many patients report their phantom limbs feel frozen in unnatural positions or experience crushing pain equivalent to someone twisting or contorting the absent extremity. The sensation can persist for decades, with some World War II veterans reporting continuous phantom pain more than 50 years after their injuries. Modern treatments include mirror box therapy, where visual feedback tricks the brain into seeing the missing limb move. In October 2012, FBI agents arrested NYPD officer Gilberto Valle following an investigation that uncovered disturbing online communications. Valle, a 6-year police veteran, had spent months participating in dark web forums dedicated to discussing the kidnapping, torture, and cannibalization of women. Using police databases, Valle researched and compiled detailed dossiers on potential victims, including his wife, who discovered his activities after installing monitoring software on their shared computer. Investigators found elaborate documents detailing abduction plans, specialized restraint methods, and cooking preparations for specific women. Valle had also conducted internet searches for human-sized ovens, chemicals to render victims unconscious, and techniques for rope bondage. His defense team argued these communications represented fantasy role-play within a subculture of cannibalism fetishists, with no actual intent to commit crimes. Initially convicted in March 2013, Valle's case sparked nationwide debate about thought crimes versus genuine threats. In July 2014, a federal judge overturned his conviction. Archaeological excavations across England have unearthed hundreds of witch bottles, counter-magical devices buried beneath thresholds, hearths, and foundations from the 16th to 18th centuries. These protective vessels, typically Bellarmine jugs, salt-glazed stoneware bottles featuring bearded face designs, contain meticulously arranged contents designed to trap malevolent forces. The most common components included the intended victim's urine, human hair, nail clippings, thorns, pins, and bent nails, often arranged in specific patterns. According to period grimoires and folk magic practitioners, these bottles function through sympathetic magic. The urine attracted the witch's curse, believed to seek its human source, while the sharp objects would impale the evil spirit, trapping it permanently within the sealed vessel. Scientific analysis of preserved specimens from Suffolk and London reveals additional components including heart-shaped cloth poppets representing the victim, knotted threads symbolizing the binding of evil, and small animal bones. During the polio epidemics of the 1940s to 50s, the iron lung represented both medical salvation and physical imprisonment for thousands of patients with bulbar polio, which paralyzed breathing muscles. These 650-pound metal chambers, officially called negative pressure ventilators, encased patients' bodies while their heads remained outside. The machines created vacuum pressure that physically expanded and contracted patients' chest cavities, forcing their lungs to inhale and exhale. At the height of the 1952 U.S. polio epidemic, approximately 1,200 patients relied on iron lungs simultaneously. The machines required constant electricity. During power outages, medical staff manually operated hand pumps to keep patients alive. Following the Salk vaccine's introduction in 1955, polio cases plummeted, leaving hospitals with surplus machines. Many decommissioned iron lungs were stored in hospital basements or warehouses, creating graveyards of the obsolete technology. Today, less than 10 Americans still use modified iron lungs, including Paul Alexander of Dallas. Discovered in 2002 by marine biologists researching a whale carcass 10,000 feet deep in Monterey Bay, Osedax mucoflorus, literally bone-eating snotflower, represents one of deep-sea ecology's most macabre adaptations. These marine worms, ranging from 1 to 7 centimeters long, colonize fallen whale skeletons within days of detection. Having no mouth or digestive system, the worms extend root-like structures that penetrate bone tissue, secreting acid-based compounds that dissolve calcium and collagen. Symbiotic bacteria within these roots then digest the extracted nutrients which the worm absorbs. Most remarkably, all visible Osedax specimens are female, The microscopic males, 100 times smaller, live as harems inside the females' bodies, with a single female hosting up to 100 males devoted solely to reproduction. The worm's reproductive strategy is extraordinarily efficient. A whalefall can host over 15,000 individual worms across multiple species, completely consuming a blue whale's massive skeleton within a decade. Recent research has discovered 26 Osedax species worldwide. On December 4, 1872, the British brig Dei Gratia encountered the American merchant vessel Mary Celeste adrift in the Atlantic Ocean between the Azores and Portugal. Captain David Morehouse was shocked to discover the 100-foot brigantine completely abandoned, yet in seaworthy condition. The Mary Celeste's cargo of 1,701 barrels of industrial alcohol remained largely intact, and the crew's personal belongings, including valuable possessions and instruments, were undisturbed. Most perplexingly, the ship's only lifeboat was missing, indicating a deliberate evacuation rather than a violent encounter. The ship's log showed the last entry was made 10 days earlier, with the final recorded position placing the vessel near the Santa Maria Island in the Azores. Forensic examination revealed the ship had faced rough seas, with rigging damage and water in the hold, but nothing catastrophic. The fate of Captain Benjamin Briggs, his wife, young daughter, and 7 experienced crewmen remains maritime history's most enduring mystery, spawning theories ranging from an alcohol vapor explosion to insurance fraud, mutiny, piracy, or even supernatural intervention. In the silver mining city of Guanajuato, Mexico, a cholera epidemic in 1833 overwhelmed local authorities, necessitating rapid burials of victims. The combination of the region's mineral-rich soil and arid climate created natural mummification conditions, preserving bodies with remarkable detail. In 1865, the city implemented a grave tax, requiring families to pay for perpetual interment. When relatives couldn't afford renewal fees, cemetery workers exhumed bodies, discovering dozens had mummified rather than decomposed. Most disturbingly, approximately 2% of these mummies display horrifically contorted facial expressions with gaping mouths, leading to their nickname, screamers. Forensic analysis indicates some victims experienced apparent consciousness during burial, with evidence of cloth fibers in their teeth and fingernails embedded in coffin lids, suggesting they awoke from cholera-induced comas after internment. The cemetery began displaying these mummies in the 1870s, eventually establishing the Museum of the Mummies, which now houses the world's largest collection of natural mummies. Dorothea Puente operated a boarding house at 1426 F Street in Sacramento during the 1980s, presenting herself as a kindly caretaker for elderly and disabled tenants. The 59-year-old grandmother-like figure specifically targeted vulnerable individuals with mental illness who received government assistance checks. Her method involved drugging tenants with sedatives mixed into their food, suffocating them once unconscious, and then hiring day laborers to dig garden holes where she buried the bodies. Her scheme unraveled in November 1988 when social worker Judy Moyes became suspicious about a missing tenant named Alvaro Montoya. During the subsequent police investigation, Puente calmly served officers lemonade in her yard, while 7 decomposing bodies lay buried feet away. After initially being released due to lack of evidence, Puente fled to Los Angeles, where a bar patron recognized her from television reports. At her 1993 trial, prosecutors demonstrated how she had continued cashing her victims' combined 5,000 monthly benefit checks while maintaining detailed forgery notes matching their signatures. She received a life sentence and died in prison in 2011. The Rat King, a rare zoological anomaly where multiple rats become permanently intertwined by their tails, represents one of nature's most disturbing curiosities. Documented cases typically involve between 5 to 32 rats whose tails become entangled through a combination of blood, dirt, hair, and excrement that hardens into an inextricable mass. The oldest preserved specimen, displayed at Mauritiana Museum in Altenburg, Germany, dates to 1828 and contains 32 rats frozen in their grotesque formation. Living rat kings have historically been discovered in confined spaces like granaries or behind walls, where the trapped animals survive by being fed by other rats or cannibalizing their conjoined companions. Medieval Europeans viewed these aberrations as omens of impending plague, believing the rat king controlled armies of disease-bearing rodents. The phenomenon's name derives from this superstition, the entangled mass forming a crown from which the dominant rat ruled. Zoologists debate whether authentic specimens represent natural occurrences or deliberate human creations. Totec, whose name translates to Our Lord the Flayed One, held crucial significance in Aztec religion as the deity governing agricultural renewal, metalworking, and seasonal transformation. During the annual Tlacaxapecualisli, Flaying of Men festival each spring, priests honored him through a complex 20-day ritual culminating in human sacrifice. Captives, typically war prisoners, underwent gladiatorial combat against elite Aztec warriors before being sacrificed atop temple platforms. The most distinctive aspect came afterward. Priests meticulously flayed the victims' entire bodies, carefully preserving the skin intact. High-ranking priests then wore these human skins for 20 days, including the hands which dangled at their sides. This gruesome practice symbolized the new skin that Earth received when spring vegetation emerged. Aztec codices illustrate these ceremonies in detail, showing priests with stitched seams where the human hides were fastened. Archaeological evidence confirms these accounts. Between 1784 and 1892, rural New England communities conducted at least 80 documented exhumations of suspected vampires during a series of tuberculosis outbreaks. The most famous case occurred in Exeter, Rhode Island, where in 1892, the body of Mercy Brown was disinterred 3 months after her death. Finding fresh blood in her heart and relatively unchanged physical features, normal decomposition effects in winter, her family removed her heart, burned it to ashes, and fed the remains to her sick brother, hoping to cure his consumption. These rituals followed a distinct pattern. When multiple family members died from tuberculosis, then called consumption, communities often blamed the first victim for feeding on surviving relatives from beyond the grave. Unlike European vampire traditions focused on steaks and garlic, New England's practical farming communities approached the problem through folk medicine. Consuming or applying the ashes from a burned heart would counteract the vampire's influence. During London's devastating Great Fire of 1666, which destroyed 13,200 homes and 87 churches across 436 acres, specialized workers called link boys performed one of history's grimmest tasks. Typically poor children or young men who normally carried torches to guide Londoners through dark streets. These individuals repurposed their skills during the disaster. Equipped with long poles and hooks, they entered partially collapsed structures deemed too dangerous for regular rescuers, dragging charred bodies from buildings that could collapse at any moment. Working in groups of 3 or 4, they used wet cloths over their faces as primitive respirators against toxic smoke. Their compensation came through a macabre payment system, a few pence per recoverable corpse, incentivizing speed over careful handling. Historical accounts describe how many link boys themselves perished when weakened floors gave way or oxygen-deprived environments. The 45.52-carat deep blue Hope diamond's notorious history began when French merchant Jean-Baptiste Tavernier acquired it from India's Kollur mine in 1668, possibly stolen from a Hindu temple statue where it served as the eye of a deity. After selling it to King Louis XIV, the diamond passed through royal hands before disappearing during the French Revolution, shortly after Marie Antoinette wore it. When it resurfaced in 1839, owners experienced suspicious misfortunes. Banker Henry Thomas Hope's family financial collapse, American socialite Evelyn Walsh McLean's son's death in a car accident, and several suicides among subsequent owners. The diamond exhibits unusual properties, glowing red under ultraviolet light due to its high boron content and phosphorescent properties that continue for seconds after the light source is removed. This eerie phenomenon, combined with its troubled provenance, cemented its reputation as cursed long before it was donated to the Smithsonian Institution in 1958. In medieval and Renaissance Germany, execution by sword was considered an honorable death reserved for nobility and citizens of high standing, distinguishing it from the common gallows. The executioner's sword, Richtschwerter, differed significantly from battle swords, measuring approximately 45 inches long with a flattened end rather than a pointed tip, specifically designed for the horizontal cutting motion required for clean decapitation. These ceremonial instruments featured intricate engravings depicting symbols of justice, biblical scenes, or execution dates. Nuremberg's executioners, particularly the famous Schmitz family who served for 6 generations, had their personal swords blessed by priests before use. The Nuremberg Historical Museum houses the renowned sword of Franz Schmidt, who meticulously documented 394 executions in his journal, from 1573 to 1617. These swords were so culturally significant that families passed them through generations, with many bearing inscriptions like, "Through justice I am served," or, "When I raise the sword, may God give the condemned eternal life." The Danse Macabre, or Dance of Death, emerged as a powerful artistic motif following the Black Death pandemic that killed 1/3 of Europe's population between 1470 and 1490, 1,347 to 1,351. These elaborate murals depicted animated skeletons leading people from all social classes, popes, kings, merchants, peasants, in a procession toward open graves. First appearing in Paris around 1424, these works spread throughout Europe, adorning cemetery walls and church interiors. The skeletons were often portrayed playing musical instruments while gleefully dancing, emphasizing death's mockery of human vanity. Artists intentionally designed these skeletons with permanent grins to remind viewers that death was not just inevitable, but potentially imminent. The artistic tradition served as a memento mori, remember you must die, during an era when plague could sweep through communities with devastating speed. On February 19, 1994, emergency room staff at Riverside General Hospital in California encountered an unprecedented medical mystery when treating Gloria Ramirez. Upon drawing her blood, medical staff noticed an ammonia-like smell and observed manila-colored crystals in her blood sample. Within minutes, several staff members developed severe symptoms: nausea, fainting, respiratory distress, and temporary paralysis. 23 people fell ill, 5 were hospitalized, and 1 spent 2 weeks in intensive care with liver and kidney damage. The hospital required evacuation. The California Department of Health Services investigation proposed that Ramirez, who had cervical cancer and was self-medicating with dimethyl sulfoxide, DMSO, had this compound converted to dimethyl sulfate in her oxygen-deprived bloodstream, creating a volatile, toxic gas when exposed to air. Washington Irving's 1820 short story, The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, introduced the iconic specter to American literature, but the character has deeper historical roots. During the American Revolutionary War, Hessian mercenaries fought for the British, and numerous soldiers were decapitated by cannonballs in battle. Archaeological excavations near Tarrytown, New York, uncovered mass graves containing headless Hessian soldiers, lending credibility to the local legends that inspired Irving. The horseman specifically represents a Hessian cavalryman who lost his head to a cannonball during the 1776 Battle of White Plains. Irving brilliantly merged this historical tragedy with Dutch-American folklore about supernatural riders. The horseman's description, carrying his severed head upon his saddle, created such a powerful image that it spawned countless adaptations across literature, film, and television.